Never a dull moment
Hell no.
in the Power and Speed studios.
Yeah.
All right, it's Monday.
Fuck yeah. It's wait a minute. It's not Monday.
I had to do that to piss those retards off. They complain that
It's Monday. Hey, we're back.
Oh, yeah.
Gets here quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, and actually, we had an extra couple days there.
Yeah, I know. Hey, we're Power and Speed. 908-751-0211.
And, of course, don't even bother. Oh, you still got to like us on Facebook and iTunes, but don't forget to share us on anything.
You know, I yelled at him for his little creepy Ted voice.
Yeah, I
the
know.
other day.
A little Barbie voice. You done good, Ted.
Sort of.
Yeah, right.
I got to tell you, I don't know what it came from in particular. Big influx of people, like friend requests and stuff on the fan page, thanks to Aaron. And you made an observation too, because you had a guy you were talking to about where was he from? Perth. You don't happen to know his name, do you?
Yeah, I think his name is Kyle Hunt.
Okay,
if I remember correctly.
Well, that's I mean, we knew obviously because of Aaron. There's people listening in Australia.
Yeah,
but there's people kind of listening everywhere. But when you get,
was there one in Nairobi?
I don't. Really? There might be. I didn't look at Nairobi. Oh. I didn't actually go actively looking for anybody. But it's kind of funny because when I'm not a Facebook guy. I don't use it. That's why I don't have a real account like you do, because you use it for family stuff and everything else.
I got both.
Yeah. I just have Power Speed Mike because I don't really want to talk to anybody.
Yep. Anybody
that I don't still talk to, I don't want to. Simple, you know.
By design, right?
And we've got that whole birthday thing. We don't need to get into all that again. So now I would just approve people. Say, oh, look, guy wants to be my friend. Oh, my friend. And now I've got like some guy from India who's sending pictures of like flowers for donations.
Yeah, that's what happened to me with my last, with the first Power Speed Tom that is still blacklisted. And they want me to send proof that that's my real name. And it's so funny. Like, I got friends that are named like, Sharky Manischewitz and, obvious fake names. There's a guy, I saw one today. What the hell was it? It was like Fast Car or some shit, right? Yeah. And they're busting my balls because Power Speed Tom, like they think, I don't know what they think. I got to send them a bill. I got to send them a fucking, college, my diploma.
I mean, like speed is not unheard of.
No.
You got Lake Speed.
Lake Speed.
I mean, look, there's a name for you, Lake Speed. If somebody was going to think something was made up,
I'm his big brother.
Wonder if he ever got, blacklisted.
Probably would. I'm going to see if he has a Facebook account. I'm going to friend him and I'm going to rat him out.
Say, listen, me and my brother Lake, our parents were pretty messed up. I ended up with Power. He ended up with Lake.
Yeah.
My other brother Cliff.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say our sister.
Yeah.
But I couldn't think of one fast enough.
So anyway, now I go through and I look if the guy's got anything relating to a car or car related, I approve him.
Yeah, a picture of a car.
Yeah, something. I mean, it doesn't have to be in his profile
Works
page,
at a car wash.
Yeah, even that guy could be a fan, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
But I looked through, so we got a couple guys that I was just shocked. Guy's name is Jay Mighty, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm going to bastardize all these names. Jay is from Jamaica. Really? Honda guy.
All right, it wasn't Kyle Hunt.
Okay. Why, the guy correct you?
Yeah.
You're a dick.
Yeah, his name's Cypher. He's like, dude, I'm Kyle Hunt. You're stupid. He didn't say that, but he's thinking it. Okay. He's like, I'm not in Australia though.
Where is he?
Cypher, where are you?
Well,
it's obviously not. Yeah, he's in the chat room.
I thought there was a guy from Australia.
Oh no, there is. I got the name wrong.
You got the name wrong.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'll look him up.
So then we've got a guy. I am never going to be able to say this. Carl Christian.
Rutabaga?
Reno, Nevada.
Moeng. Lives in Norway.
Wow.
Nice.
That's pretty cool. He's friends with Paul Yaw. So
okay.
Paul has quite a reach himself.
I think Paul Yaw's got the large reach out there.
Yeah. And now we got a guy that I don't think I can ever get this right. No, maybe not. Nuvashan Gavender, I think is how you would say that. He's from Africa.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah.
It's crazy.
It's really, and those are just the ones that I happen to take notice of because I started filtering through them.
Right.
I mean, we know we got, people in UK and I mean, I don't know. I'm amazed that these people are entertained by us. I still kind of am.
I think it's really cool, and it's a testament to our brilliance.
I like how the UK is called in, so.
I snuck that by, didn't I?
Yeah, good thing I started paying attention towards the end of that, or I wouldn't have been able to
I was
look
just
at you.
checking to see if you were, actually.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the listens, and thank you for, friending Power Speed Mike. It's interesting, and I'm really glad. We're all glad you enjoy it.
You know what the funny thing is? That the Power Speed Mike icon is a known icon, too.
Well, there was something funny about that. Remember, I had the other old guy in the car with a scarf or whatever, or like he was with his wife.
The guy knows that car.
A listener said, I know that dude.
Yeah.
He's from our cruise.
I remember you
I was going to talk about it. I don't think I ever did.
No,
like,
you
didn't.
You told me about it, yeah.
But yeah, the guy knows the guy, and then he sent me a picture. I'm like, that's the guy. It was just a random Google picture of an old guy driving.
Yeah. Funny.
Crazy stuff.
It's screwy how small the web makes everything, the world.
It's
good point. Fair point, Tad.
It's amazing to me. We probably got to talk to this nitwit at some point.
Oh.
Okay, as long as we could just say, Nitwit, you're on the air.
Nitwit, you're on the air.
I was going to call in, and I wanted to bust balls because I remember.
Well, we beat you to it.
A couple episodes back, you gave Tom some shit about not returning phone calls, not returning text messages, shit like that. And hey, if you really want to go that far back, I think it was one of DeSoma's episodes where he didn't confirm because you text him, and then Tom called him. But I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
What the fuck, was your phone broken for fucking 3 weeks?
Well, you might have come to a realization here.
Well, whose phone? Mike's personal phone or the studio phone?
Mike's personal phone. If anybody calls the studio phone, I don't even know what it does during the day. I didn't even think about it. I don't know if there's a voice. I have no clue.
Right. It's probably pretty happy in here.
Well,
just hanging out.
I started thinking, I was like, every time Tom doesn't answer, it's like, this son of a bitch. He's like, he just don't want to talk to me.
Uh-huh.
No.
It's not ringing a bell, I guess. Right?
No, not ringing a bell. Rich, listen, it has nothing to do with that, but you don't, and I'm not trying. Tom will vouch for it, and I vouch for Tom too. And part of tolling on Tom about not answering the phone is he's busy. But Tom can vouch for me the same way. I have so much shit going on, dude. You have no idea. It's amazing I can even sleep.
Well, I understand that, and I hope everything that I sent your way.
Absolutely, and I was going to talk about that, but now since you so rudely brought it up, I might not.
Yeah, really. Fuck him.
He's got a graphics girl for me.
Oh, cool.
That he had call me, but I really couldn't take. Here, Rich,
not fuck him yet.
Well, listen.
I'll talk to the graphics girl.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to do. Rich, to give you an example, I have a guy that I've blown off for 2 weeks now because I need him to do some web work for me to redesign something that's like going to imminently fail if I don't get into compliance. And I haven't even had time to sit with him on the phone, but I appreciate it. And
I was just calling to bust your balls.
I know you were. That's why I called you Nitwit. And listen, he gave me a nice little recommendation where to get a little file stone when I was working on Jeff's rings. So kudos to Rich. He knew where to find it. And you gave me.
I was actually going to send you one of mine so that way you didn't have to order them because I didn't know the time frame.
That would be bad because then I'd have to get. It's bad enough you got my phone number. Then I'd have to give you my address.
Then you'd be showing up here, and we'd have to smack you around. By we, I mean me.
No, really. Listen, Rich, I appreciate everything you did, and the thing for my mom's fence, got that going too. That's a whole nother thing. He helped me find some Amish people, so we're good.
Amish.
All right.
Well, that's good.
Any car-related stuff, buddy? Instead of just being a dick.
I started pulling all the fucking. I found some for my pickup. I found some chewed wires, from mice and stuff. So I started pulling the harness out, and I think I'm gonna try and do my own version of wiring. And
now, just real quick, you're gonna put a 358 style Northeast dirt motor in that, turbocharged or just fuel injected? What are you gonna do with it?
No, it's going to be, I'm going to go fuel injected. I talked to Paul about some stuff. I'm going to go fuel injected in time because there's some things that I want to try. That concept with, optimizing injector, not just location, but the injector timing. I want to try and fuck with that because, it would be it's kind of interesting to me to try that stuff out. So I'm going to use like their 2200 cc injectors, and it's naturally aspirated motor, giant injectors, and try and cram all the fuel in that open window. And then It'll probably have a small plate on it or something like that.
All right. Yeah, that's right. You were talking. I forgot about that. You were talking about doing nitro stuff.
Does Rich know FUD?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Maybe.
They should talk.
What was that?
I should have given him Alan's phone number. So
You should
call me.
You should.
There you go.
I think they would get along.
They can start their own podcast.
Swimmingly.
Swimmingly.
All right. No, Rich. I'm glad you're working on it, and you can't go wrong listening to the Paul Yaw episodes because he's got a lot of good information if you really pay attention.
Well, I downloaded that, and I also downloaded chains. I have a bunch of them, but I downloaded those chains and both of Paul's and the EFI University episode just because the information in that, like, I took notes on them and everything. It's a crazy amount of stuff that's in there.
Yeah. Well, we'll try to get even better with dragging shit out of people. So, all right, man. I just wanted to pick up because I felt like a dick seeing you on the phone board all the time and answering.
Yeah, well, that's you.
Yep. Hey, Rich.
That New Jersey stuff.
Yep, Rich.
What's up?
All right, he's gone.
Just had to do that, right?
I had to do that. No, I feel bad because he has called me a bunch of times.
Wait. Should we do?
Yeah, I know.
Should we do the thanks for calling?
The thanks for calling thing was funny. Crudge. I mean, I should get that one and have that as a sound clip.
Yeah, we
Thanks
should.
for calling.
He's just laughing.
I know. We should.
Well, let's do this. Let's talk about our guest because he's going to be on any minute. We've rambled about dumb shit long enough.
Oh, we're not going to talk about my Uber driver?
I passed him on the way up.
It didn't work
down the driveway.
It didn't work.
No.
Did
he thumbs up?
Do we want to talk about that because now we might have to worry about if we offend people? Nah, I don't care.
Probably not.
Tom got an Uber up here because he actually bought my brother's Z06 and he needed to be able to drive it back. So he's going to get an Uber. And I was like, oh, dude.
Yeah.
I could just imagine what brings you here. And
well, that was after you berated me for a half an hour about
I
having children and what good are children if they can't drive you here, you fucking loser. And so once he got done beating me down.
Thanks for making sure that everybody knows I'm exactly in real life as I am here.
He is.
So I figured that, Uber driver, I figured kind of liberal.
Yeah.
And I was hoping for like a hipster sort of guy that would be driving a Prius.
Yep.
But it didn't work out quite that way.
No, it didn't. Although he was liberal, but he was a construction guy, and he kind of pissed me off. I got to tell you before he calls, because he pissed me off right in the beginning. I don't know how we got on it, and I said, "Listen, man, I don't know, I don't care who you voted for, but blah blah blah." I start talking, and he said, "Oh well, I didn't vote for him." I was like, "Well, who'd you vote for?" Like, you moron. He's like, "I voted for Hillary. I'm in the Carpenters Union, and they told us, we're supporting Hillary." I was like, you kidding me? Somebody told you who to vote for?
That's the worst thing about all this. I mean, everybody can make their choice. And look, we pick on Scott from time to time.
Yeah.
I think Scott might have been worse. Wasn't he a Bernie guy?
He might have been.
He might, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was, actually.
But, I mean, look, if you're going to vote, you should be informed. But anyway, continue.
Well, you shouldn't be told who to vote.
Yeah, that's
who to vote for. And this guy's admitting it. So we start talking. And, part of what ruined the plan that you were going to do is because in the end, the guy, he really tapped out early on the argument because he's trying to argue with me. But my point was going to be, he said, I was watching the map as the voting was going on. And once I saw Wisconsin, I knew it was bad, because I've been up there and, people up there, they wear cowboy hats and they don't think women can run anything. And I said, dude, are you fucking kidding me? Are you talking about Wisconsin? Like this Wisconsin up there? He's like, yeah. I said, man, listen, I've been in every state in this country. He's like, well, I've been in a lot of them. I was like, well, I've been in, and I lied. I haven't been I haven't been Wyoming and I haven't been to New Mexico. But I've been to all the rest. And people in Wisconsin they're not male chauvinist, jack-offs. I don't believe that.
I would like to think most people aren't.
No, I'm not. But anyway, he's got this, and the funny thing is, he's a North Jersey guy. He's like, hey, forget about it, and all of that. He talks like one of us, and then he tells me he voted for Hillary, and it killed me.
Well, I think the real funny thing here is, you want to tell the people what my plan was?
Yeah, sure. So if we got a hipster guy, I was going to
hard time container myself.
I was going. Me and Mike are texting as soon as I got in the car, and he's like, so what's up? And I said, yeah, he's a liberal. And we start talking. And then, 5 minutes in, I had to tell him he tapped out because, let me just get back to that. I asked him what the benefit of sending refugees from Syria here is to us and to the United States. And he had no answer. So then he tapped out. He's like, I don't want to talk about politics anymore. I was like, all right, you fag.
Did he even talk to you the rest of the way or no?
Well, about 10 minutes of silence. Then he started talking about something else. And then I told him I wanted to stop for power bars because I was hungry and yeah, whatever. He was all right. But anyway, if it was a hipster guy or a kid or or somebody that we could really take advantage of. So we pull up and the guy drops me off in front of the house because the plan went, we kind of killed it. But Mike had an AR with 2 clips ready to go. And
2 clips with bag links.
Yeah. And he was going to walk out to the car holding his AR-15 like a fucking lunatic. And, I guess we were going to video it or something. But this guy he wasn't the right guy. And the gun was out, and it would have gone to plan, but
I'm talking to somebody on the telephone. He comes walking up the driveway. I'm like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, he was all ready.
And I wasn't gonna brandish it and scare the guy. I just wanted to have it on me.
Yeah, it wasn't like there was one in the chamber.
No, nothing like that. Never do anything like that. But yeah,
but they were loaded clips. They're ready to go.
Got to be ready, right? We don't need to talk about that.
I should have got up and yelled, "Kill this motherfucker!"
You know who he voted for?
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, should I put a chair halfway down the driveway and sit there and stop the guy like he had to get clearance to come in or something. But I wasn't quite that motivated.
No, I hear you.
So yeah, I'm a little messed up. So let's talk about our guest.
Yeah, Greg Banish. I've been talking to him for a little bit, and brilliant guy. He's written a few books, one of which I read, and I don't read, but it was really good. He owns a company called Calibrated Success. He actually is a legit calibration engineer. Like he's an accredited type. That's what he went to school for, type thing. And he's worked for all the OEs. He's going to be good. We can talk about anything.
When you say he worked for all the OEs,
Ford, Chevy, Chrysler,
yeah, Lotus. You call them.
Well, I don't know.
Saleen.
I think he did I think he did have some involvement with. He told me whether it was Saleen or.
Well, I'm not playing Stump Tom.
No.
I read his.
Oh, it was
yeah.
Saleen.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it was Saleen. I knew it was one of them. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff.
So I would imagine you don't work for those companies unless you really got a handle on stuff.
Well, especially at that level. And he's going to, we talked about that calibration at their level, calibration of a new platform, how long it takes, the amount of manpower in it, all the fail safes that they have to put in place, all the failures that they have to, instigate. It seems like a really cool conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's and we can talk about this, I guess, because you said we can. He actually works to try to stop regulation from getting a stranglehold on this industry.
Yeah. He's gone to Washington twice with SEMA to lobby for the performance industry, and he's pretty well versed on that EPA situation. So we can talk. It seems to me like we're probably going to talk about that for the lion's share of this show, because I'm interested. I know you're interested. I'm sure the listeners are interested because it's such a big part of what we do. We can't have the government fuck it up for lack of better.
Strangle us.
Well, yeah. I do want to talk about it, but by the same token, there's 2 ways that consumers should look at this. Well, remember that initial statement that you weren't going to be able to convert a car to a drag
race car. Yeah.
Like it had to be a purpose built. Like you couldn't take a car and convert it.
Yep.
And that was actually a pretty serious deal the way it was written, because that would kind of end a lot.
Yeah.
It would end an awful lot. Like, if I remember reading it correctly, like what they were talking about and where people said it could go. And listen, don't make no mistake about it. If people think that, well, it really didn't mean that. Well, if it says that, that's where it's going to go, because we have things that go on. And listen, both Tom and I will both tell you, we're not tinfoil hat anti-government people. That's not it. But there are certain things that when they get their hands on it, they will do what they can to push things their way.
Right.
And that's what they do. And I'm not picking on, I saw Nitro Scott's on. I'm not picking on Nitro Scott. I'm not picking on anybody who thinks the environment's important. Tom and I don't agree on this. He thinks climate change is bullshit. I think there's something definitely happening. My personal thought.
Yeah. It's bullshit though.
Okay.
Did you hear about the volcano that just erupted? Like it was like a month ago.
No.
It had some activity. I think it was for like a 20-hour period, and they estimate that it released 20 years worth of human carbon emissions in 20 hours. And
how many cow farts would that be measured at?
is that a range?
No, I know, but I know a guy that's extremely smart told me that part of the problem is sequestered carbon.
Sequestered carbon.
Yes.
Captured carbon.
That was FUD. So, okay. All right. So at any rate,
he can't even spell sequestered.
I think he can. He's educated.
Yeah.
I don't think that we should, modify everything and just not give a shit about everything. I mean, we should, be a little bit responsible. You don't throw garbage out your window, do you?
No.
It's a little bit the same thing.
You don't piss in your backyard, do you?
No. Well, yeah, I do.
Well, I do.
That's right. Oops. That's different.
It's kind of I feel it's like that. Like we shouldn't go out of our way to make a mess, but for what we're doing, we represent a
tiny fraction
of what goes on in the automotive industry.
And truth be told, we are, especially in this country, we've been getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner for years.
China's up and coming.
Yeah. The stuff we do is actually pretty amazing with regard to keeping our environment clean.
It is pretty amazing. And the problem with that whole Paris thing, and I don't even want to get into the political side of things, but what's really going on here is the United States is being held to a standard that other countries aren't. And that, look, I read the actual deal.
Mm-hmm.
I read I think it was like 390 some odd pages on the internet about what this was and why it was. One of the main reasons for this and why things like the EPA clamping down on race cars is because they want us at a level of compliance that sort of matches almost a penalty, because we developed first and we used resources that created, pollution back in probably the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
That somehow or another we're the bad guys. So now we're the guys that really pay the heavy penalty because we did it first.
That's total horse shit.
But that's honestly what a good portion of it was.
Yeah, I believe that.
So if you don't think that the EPA stuff is important, I'm relatively sure when Greg talks about this, you're going to be surprised. I think there's a lot more to this than, and like I said, don't think for a minute that they wouldn't push this as far as they could. I mean, of course they would.
I think it's all about the money. I don't think they give two. I think they know the truth. The scientists aren't stupid. They're not going to start saying, "Oh yeah, it's all bullshit," because then they're not going to get their grant money.
Yeah,
it's a crock. It's all about money. Everything's about money.
It is, and that is one thing that you always think is that everything is done out of the money. I can tell you this: the people in the United States that are uber, for lack of a better term, climate people.
Yep.
They don't care about the money. They just think that it's their duty, and that's fine. They have a right to be that way.
Yeah, and they're the ones that are being taken advantage of, like we are, by the people in power.
Well, it's look, be responsible.
Yeah.
Don't throw shit out the window.
Yeah.
It kills me because I find shit in front of my house all the time.
Don't cut your catalytic converters off your street car.
No, there's kind of no reason to. I mean, they're good enough now. I just had a conversation with Jeff about that. I said, do you gain anything by cutting them off? And he's like, they've gotten so good, it doesn't seem like it. Like, yep. But if you got a street car that's making 1,500, maybe you kind of got it.
Well, we're going to talk about that with Greg.
Okay, perfect.
That exact scenario.
Okay.
He's making 4-digit horsepower with catalytic converters, which has been done. I mean, I know it's done.
Well, see, the problem is that's not the accurate question. The accurate question is, if you took the catalytic converters off, would you be able to make 4-digit horsepower numbers plus?
Yeah.
Like it's the impact. Like what impact does it have to have it?
I think he'll be able to answer that.
Well, here he is.
Yes, he is.
Hang on.
Hey, Greg, welcome, man.
Hey, what are you guys talking catalytic converters? What's that thing?
Yeah, we are. We're seeing how much they bring for scrap money these days.
Dude, so we had a rash of those up here in Detroit, and the car dealerships around here were getting hit. Dudes would show up with a cordless sawzall and hit every pickup truck in the lot.
Same here.
Overnight.
Wow. That's a hell of a way to make a living. Laying on your back at night.
They're probably doing better than us, man.
Yeah, right? Could be. So welcome, man.
I'm in the wrong business.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you're in the wrong business. I got to ask you, how was your swim?
Pretty good. I cut them short a little bit, so it was only a little over a mile.
You swam a mile?
Yeah, like interval training. So it's all like, 50, 100, 200 at a time.
Wow.
Only way I'm swimming a mile is if a shark's chasing me. And even by then, I'd probably give up at a quarter and let him eat me.
Yeah.
How many of you guys are going to watch Phelps race the shark on Shark Week this year?
What?
Yeah, on Shark Week. They're going to have Michael Phelps racing a shark this year.
Oh, that should be good.
Like Fonzie and the motorcycle dude. They literally jumped the shark.
Jump the shark.
That's crazy. That's literally crazy. So, what we were talking about was something that you and I talked about briefly. We're talking about the environment and, how Mike has one feeling and I have another. And, but bottom line is we should try to be as clean and as responsible as we can. And, I made a comment. Yeah, don't rip your converter off your car. It's just dumb. And I said, yeah, Greg and I were talking before about, Greg was working on some stuff to make 4-digit power with catalytic converters. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah. Let me back up just a half a step on you guys. So, way back, like right as I graduated college, I brought myself a twin turbo kit for my Mustang, and nobody in the industry really knew how to tune these things. They kept trying to treat it like a Vortex, and I'm like, screw it, I'll just do it myself, right? Give me the software. How do I get into this thing, right? So I do that, and then it becomes tuned for a friend of a friend, and like the whole time, one of my mantras was like, let's just follow the science, guys. Let's just burn clean, right? And when you're not wide open throttle, there's no reason to be anything other than stoic. It doesn't benefit you, right? If you're not power limited, like you're not airflow limited already, adding extra fuel does nothing to help the car run nicer. Like we can run awesome everywhere, Lambda 1. All you gotta do is find it, right? And as it turns out, wide bands make that really, really stinking easy to do. So my theory has always been just don't waste energy, don't waste stuff, right? And that included wasting fuel. So over the years, like one of the things that kind of manifested in when I was doing tuning for people is they get better fuel economy than their previous tune because, previous tuners were in there, they just kind of do the FMU, just hose and fuel at it, the wrong size injector, inject their rail pressure. Things are all jacked up, right? So we fix things, and all of a sudden it finds Lambda 1, and the fuel economy gets better. They're like, oh, wow, man, I used to get like 12 miles per gallon. Now I get 20. And like, they're impressed with 20. I'm like, okay. Okay, so fast forward to today, and we talk about making horsepower through cats. And I submit to you that we live in the absolute golden age of horsepower nowadays. Right? There is so many options out there for flat out stupid, ridiculous horsepower that you can buy from the dealership with a warranty and it passes emissions. Right? How many 600 horsepower cars are for sale out there today?
Yeah, and, good handful.
10, 15 years ago, there's it was kind of zero, right?
And everybody used to say, well, all the car guys ended up growing up in the wrong time.
Yep.
This sucks. But you might want to take a look around because it's pretty friggin' amazing.
Pretty
and then
badass.
These cars you get, like he said, you get good mileage. For what you got, bang for buck, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, keep in mind, 6.4 Apache, Hellcat, and even Demon, they get decent fuel economy when they're, in 8th gear locked up on the freeway, just kind of cruising along Lambda 1. It doesn't know that it has this potential for 700-800 horsepower up on the top end. You're not making 700 or 800. You're just kind of, cruising down the road at 50 miles an hour. You're using 15 horsepower, right? It's not that much, right? It doesn't take a lot of engine to make 15 horsepower.
Isn't that crazy?
You don't need to burn a lot of fuel to do it.
It's literally crazy what goes on these days. But so what are you working?
Yeah, now the other side of that is, if you're going to have big power, you're going to make a lot of heat. You're going to pass a lot of energy out the exhaust, and so you kind of got to do a couple of things for care and feeding of a catalyst, just to make sure you don't destroy it while you're in the danger zone, right? So, in development, we measure everything, right? We put thermocouples all over the place. We put pressure taps. And, we're taking skin temp, gas temp, catalyst mid-bed temp. And, we got instrumentation literally up the wazoo on these development cars. So we know the temp of everything. We measure it all. And then we turn around and make a model because we're not going to sell cars with all kinds of measurement shit on it to the public. So some poor bastard's got to, model all that and make the model match up with the measured reality. And that model is what gets called when you hammer the throttle and, You spend time up in the danger zone, high speed, high load, hot exhaust. And if you watch the air-fuel ratio, you see that, the longer you spend in the high temperature zone, the richer and richer and richer it gets, because it's modeling the cat temp, and it says, hey, in order to stay cool, I'm going to have to dump some fuel on this bad boy just to keep the temperatures below the threshold.
Well, I thought that was the opposite. I thought if you put more, like if you made a richer mixture, I thought the catalytic converter would work harder and get hotter.
No. So the catalytic converter gets hot when you have what we call an exotherm, meaning, heat's going out. And to do that, it's just fire, right? You got to have three things for fire. You got to have fuel, oxygen, and heat, right? So if you deprive it of oxygen, it's not generating its own heat unless it's getting the oxygen from somewhere else, like an exhaust leak, or if you're doing scavenging and you have blow-by or, some other nonsense that generally we don't deal with right now. So, we actually did a really cool test in my Advanced Tuning Series DVDs that are out right now. Episode 2 was nothing but fuel chemistry and air-fuel ratio and injectors, right? Just explaining the fuel side of how fuel injection works. And on the engine dyno, I picked one speed, one load, and I varied the air-fuel ratio. So we did like what we call a hook test. And we just swept air-fuel ratios, and I mapped both torque and exhaust gas temperature, bank 1 and bank 2 on this engine. And we plotted it, and we show it. Like, here's the results. And as predicted, there is some place where temperatures peak, and there's some other place where torque peaks. So temperatures actually peak just slightly lenostoic, usually about 5% lenostoic. Right? It's hottest burn, it's the best thermal efficiency for an engine. Doesn't mean it's best overall efficiency, just thermally it's most efficient because it's generally kind of hot. Problem is when it's hot, it makes oxides and nitrogen, and we don't like that for emissions, so the OEM guys don't operate there. We back it off the Lambda 1. But then we find another phenomenon. The more fuel I screw into it, coming from Lambda 105 down to Lambda 1, which is where we operate 99% of the time, it cools it off just a little bit. And then as we go richer and richer from there, the actual exhaust gas temps start dropping off further and further and further the more fuel I add to this engine. Now, it makes more torque for a while, right? So there's some amount of extra fuel that you add that actually adds power. And that's where if you start looking at ECU data, you see things called power enrichment, because adding some extra fuel does increase torque. Dr. Haywood told us that in the college books and everything, but we know it. I mean, hot routers, we just know. We go, you run that thing, aspirated, you run 12.5 to 1, or boosted, you run, 11.5 to 1. Everyone knows these air-fuel ratio numbers instead of lambda. But we inherently know that some extra fuel is good for us making more horsepower. So we do it, and there's science behind it. And if you do that, if you actually watch the exhaust gas temperatures for the same speed, the same air charge, same load, you would actually get slightly cooler as we add fuel. The problem is that we just tend to pump more and more air and more hot exhaust gases out the pipe, and that results in more cool temperature being dumped into the exhaust system, but it's not because the raw unit temperature of the stuff coming past the exhaust valve was hotter. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. How good have the converters gotten as of late? Like, I mean, from an efficiency standpoint, like from point A to point B, like where we're at today.
It's kind of the same efficiency, but what they do is they'll spend more money on them, right? So the catalytic converter has a base that's metal or ceramic, right? We call it the ceria. And on the ceria, there are wash coats of expensive metals. Things that end in elm are expensive, like platinum, palladium, rhodium. And so they put some amount of wash coat on there. They put so many grams of platinum into the catalyst, which is why people want to saw them off of trucks in the parking lot. And so if they just put more platinum in there, it has more conversion efficiency. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
they just go tighter and tighter cell counts. So instead of our hot router catalyst, we look at guys are think that they're doing the environment a favor. They put like 100 cell per inch cell count in there, and most OEM stuff today is kind of 400, 600 cell per inch, so 4 to 6 times more surface area. There's some 900 cell per inch stuff out there on ULEV and SULEV stuff, depending on how clean they have to make that tailpipe number. So we just put a finer and finer mesh so that more of the exhaust molecules directly act on the catalytic material. So we just put it, we give it more opportunity to convert, and we can store more stuff on that surface of the walls of the catalyst.
Greg, I got to ask you.
All it does is just cost more money.
I got to ask, are you on a headset?
Yeah. Does it sound awful?
Yeah, it actually does.
Hang on 1 second here. Let me try and fix that then. Any better now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Oh, yeah.
It's fantastic now.
Hang on, now I got to roll some levels back. Blow everybody's ears out.
Jobs is horked me again. All right, sweet.
Yeah, sorry about that. So before we get into, we have a couple things to ask you, but one of our listeners just, he sent in a big note. He wants to ask. He's I think he said he's a mechanic. He's a mechanical engineering student in his senior year, and he wants to get into calibration engineering, and he doesn't know where to go or what to do. I don't know where you went to school. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but what should this kid do?
All right. Well, engineering degree is the first start. We don't hire anybody into the OEM side generally without an engineering degree from an ABET certified university. So it's, it can't be, the Caribbean School of Engineering, right? It's got to be an actual real school. But there's, thousands of schools out there to pick from.
Yeah.
Mechanical, electrical, computer science are the big degrees that get you into calibration most of the time. Beyond that, it's an aptitude and an interest. Your interest in the subject matter matters a ton, right? If you come in to interview with us and you say, hey, I've been playing with cars for a while and I like hot rods and I like tinkering with stuff, man, you got to be a calibrator. Come see this. Let me show you what we do with a proto vehicle, right? So get that engineering degree. I went to CMI, which is, I guess, now Kettering, and I have a degree in mechanical engineering with an auto specialty. So it was 180 credit hours and a thesis for my undergrad.
Wow.
And I wrote my thesis on vehicle instrumentation. It was actually on braking systems, so all my torques were in the wrong direction. But luckily, I can flip the sign and figure it out how powertrain works.
Nice. Yeah, he goes to Michigan Tech, and so I guess.
Yeah, they got a good program, man. No problem.
Okay.
So,
I would think so. It's there.
Yeah, right.
Go to Monster and search keyword calibration, and there'll be stuff on the OEM side, and there seem to be always openings one way or another for it. Between traditional gasoline, diesel, and even hybrid. Just get your foot in the door somewhere.
I guess let's face it. When you get into this higher level stuff, you kind of have to have college experience. Is wonderful,
yeah.
But like real experience. But I don't know if you could learn some of the stuff you need to learn. Calculations and whatnot. From just being the guy that does it. I think this is an instance where college is required.
There's a difference between being an OEM calibrator and playing with hot rods. Right, we can get away with a lot playing on hot rods, and a lot of the heavy lifting's already done. The car's already run. Right, they gave them to us with a computer that runs everything. They pass emissions. They start at -40. They don't overheat. Right, it's already done. We just have to figure out what we did to monkey it up when we threw parts at it in the aftermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they sometimes start with a brand new blank sheet of paper, and they have a whole new engine with a whole new ECU and new software and new everything. Right, and they're just kind of figuring out as they go. And that's why, it takes 3+ years to get an OEM program from the drawing board to the dealership.
Wow.
They take it on cold trips every winter. They take it on hot trips every summer. They go to altitude, every fall and spring.
Well, what about
how we can break it?
What about specialty programs like things like, say, the Hellcat, or things when they're a new platform and I don't want to say as simple, but there's a lot more in the terms of variables. Is it even looked at that way or no?
The funny thing is they don't look at it any different. We kind of treat Hellcat at Chrysler the same way we treat the turbo 4-cylinder. It just happens to make big numbers, but it has very similar standards for everything, right? Cat temp model still has to be in place. You have to pass emissions. Right, so you got to make sure that you get those cats lit off in the first 20 seconds of the test, so you're not dumping hydrocarbons out the tailpipe. You can fail your emissions test in the first 20 seconds.
Wow, you mean the catalytic converters have to start to work in 20 seconds?
Yeah, that's the game. So if you guys open up HP tuners and look at a cal on something, a lot of times you see cold start spark retard, things like that. That's exactly to try and warm up the cat as soon as humanly possible. So, if we retard the timing, you guys know, hot rodders, right? If you put the distributor in an engine and it's, 30, 40 degrees retarded and you idle it and all of a sudden the headers turn orange,
Yep.
right? Well, we're trying to do essentially that on purpose every time we start the car from cold start. So we try and just absolutely dump a ton of heat into the exhaust pipe rather than into the water-cooled jacket of the engine, so that we can get the middle of that catalyst brick over about 400 centigrade as soon as possible. Because that's where, like, the conversion efficiency of a catalytic converter is a function of temperature. So, when the catalyst is room temp and it's only 75 degrees, it doesn't do a whole lot of converting. But if you can get that bad boy up to 400 degrees, about 98% of the leftover CO and NOx that go through it get converted into carbon dioxide and water, which is good. That's what we want to pass out the tailpipe.
Yep. Hey,
So, it's just a game to get it warmed up sooner.
I have a question. Is there anything you would do, like, and this is purely from the efficiency perspective, from a power perspective versus drivability perspective, are there things that are done to let's say, make the emissions what they need to be that actually hurt power? Or are you saying that, like, during the drivability phase, there's no throttle response problem, like everything's as good as it's going to get anyway?
Are we talking about Cathedral Port heads again?
I wasn't even asking that, but that's a really good question.
Yeah, we got to go to that.
We'll go to that.
It kind of means the same thing, though, right? Because look, the things that are good for emissions are generally good for horsepower, right? John Lingenfelter, I think, said it really well. He's like, hey, a car with really good cylinder heads will always win over the car with a good camshaft, right? We can build an engine around good cylinder heads. So if we have good mixture motion and good flow, minimum losses in the system, then we get pretty good complete combustion, and we didn't waste anything. There's no leftover stuff, right? So the more completely we burn every ounce of fuel that we put into that engine, the cleaner the tailpipe number will be. And, oh, by the way, if we can burn it all in the cylinder where it's going to be able to push on the piston rather than going out the pipe unburned, that's pretty good for horsepower.
Got it.
So generally efficiency wins everywhere.
So, all right, I got another question. I got to scroll back to it. When you guys start a calibration on a new platform, do you actually model the base map, or do you guys just know what it's going to kind of need because of your experience?
If you have a whole new engine, there's no experience, right? There's nothing to base it on. So they maybe might on the mapping guys when they're on the dyno. So let me make it clear. Like, we don't start in the vehicle, right? Engines don't see vehicles for about a year and a half at all on a program. Like, they exist only down in the basement in the dyno lab for the first year of their life. They're never in a vehicle. So we do all the base mapping right there on the dyno. So any volumetric efficiency surface or model thereof is all done in the lab. It's not done in the vehicle. We don't do math curves on the dyno because we've got a flow lab that we literally just take the whole air box, throttle body all the way out to the filter, and we just put that in the flow lab, we flow it, and we get the magical curve, we type that in, and we do not outsync the flow lab. Flow lab knows more about it than we could ever know. We put that data in directly. In the aftermarket, we kind of use the engine as our air pump and solve for that because we know we monkeyed up the cold air kit and the way air goes across the mass airflow sensor. But new engine programs start in the dyno lab. They don't start in the car. And sometimes we will start from scratch, and we'll just let everything go auto with full correction. And we use fuel flow meters, and we use lambda sensors, and we use emissions benches to do literally a carbon count, so we know exactly what the air-fuel ratio was based on the exact chemistry of the fuel we're feeding it and the flow rate of the fuel. So very scientifically, we come about the air charge number. And we might just do that right from scratch, or sometimes we get a running start because they've done like a GT Power model. So GT Power is software that can simulate an engine. It's kind of like Engine Analyzer, but on super steroids. And they can tell us almost everything about the engine. And they can theoretically say, well, if we move the camshaft center line here, or exhaust valve opening, your exhaust valve closing point here or here, here's exactly what we expect it to do to conversion efficiency and to torque and to all this other nonsense, right? So they might give us a kind of a starting point of, hey, you're probably going to need about this spark angle, or you're probably going to need about, be about this air charge per cylinder at this RPM, at this manifold pressure, at this camshaft spacing, right? It's super multidimensional. And even if they tell us, we're going to go back and measure it anyway, because I'd say at least 80% of the time they go through all that trouble to model it, and then we find out, oh, well, you didn't account for this. So data trumps a model every single time. Right? So we measure data. Like there's times I've been like on the side of the mountain in Colorado with a twin turbo V6 prototype when I was working at Ford, and we found like we're here at 1800 RPM, this KPA at this altitude and this exact condition, and what do you know? Things like 14% out. Why is it so far out, guys? And we call back to the Dyno Lab guys, and they're like, we didn't see that. We're like, well, I'm seeing it here. Let me send you the file. Can we fix this? And so they said, well, it's kind of a best fit. It mostly fit. They're like, well, it kind of doesn't here. And they have to decide, is it bad enough that they remap it, or do we just let the O2 sensors pull it in that weird oddball case?
So in these road test scenarios, do you use that for like what I'm trying to say is like, are there things that you kind of can't plan for until you actually get out on the road? Like that you just can't simulate at home, so to speak? Yeah, and it might be, an effective barrow, because I was, that particular example, I was at like, 9,200 feet of elevation. So we're 9,200 feet of elevation, and then we're, trying to cruise steady, down the road, and it's just a stack up of stuff. And what air charge temp, and were the intercoolers saturated or were they working? And, so what happens is if we find a discrepancy, we try and take as much data as humanly possible in that condition, so that we can try and dial it up and replicate it in the Dyno Lab back at home base, right? So we give those mapping guys, because that's a different team, by the way. We got to give them a sporting chance. Does that make sense? Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I imagine the amount of variables that could conceivably change because atmospheric conditions can be ridiculous. Like that's tough.
Yeah, it can go all over the place atmospherically. So we have this requirement. Customers buy the car. There's one calibration from the OEM that goes in the entire fleet of cars. Right? You don't get a special calibration because you bought your car in Denver, right? Versus Miami. You just bought a car. You're like, why can't I take it on a road trip? It should just work. And it should work in the winter in Minnesota, or it should work in the summer in Phoenix. So we just have to make sure it works. And that's why, and that drives me to another one of my pet peeves I run into with, guys in the aftermarket is they go in there and they zero out like spark adders versus temperature. Like, guys, that's in there for a reason, right?
Apparently they don't.
And, they just, and they're like, but it's taking all my timing away. I'm like, yeah, because it's hot and it changes the flame speed. And it's like science, dude.
Yeah. So sorry, we
have to build that, and it's got to be a real number.
That's really interesting. I was going to say, let's transition over to what we wanted to talk about.
When are we going to find out about the heads at the end?
No, you can ask about the heads now.
Which heads?
The cathedral ports.
Go ahead. Have at it, Mike.
Oh, I don't care. I have no opinion on this. That's the funny thing. Allison was telling me that like it's this big to do over there, and as I go back and listen to some of the podcast stuff, I'm like, are these people really arguing over this? Like, who cares?
Yeah, I really don't care. I know for me that if I was doing, and look, it's kind of hard to argue with you if you say, well, not really, Mike. But sooner or later, I understand you could have a small efficient port, but when you're moving X amount of air, the port size has to matter. It has to be part of the equation, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, assuming you're burning everything that you put into the cylinder, then the amount of stuff you can get into the cylinder is the limit of how much power you can make. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're burning it incompletely, then it's a separate discussion. Now, generally speaking, charge motion is your friend. So the more charge motion we have in cylinder, the more it kind of whips around and folds that flame front over on itself, and it reduces the burn time. So the time it takes from the actual kernel at the spark plug until things get all the way out to the walls to quench. If we could reduce that time, that would be awesome. From an engineering standpoint, I would actually love to have what we call bulk ignition, where the whole charge just went poof all at once. Because then spark timing would not be degrees before top dead center anymore.
Yeah.
It would all fire about 12 to 15 degrees after top dead center.
I was going to say after, because that's where the most effective would be.
Yeah. So you look at, we have two different measures for it. Like I explained this in like my first book, the one that you guys have on the podcast picture. We talk about both location of peak pressure and CA50, which is crank angle for 50% burn. And it's just two slightly different points in time. But CA50, if we get it about 7 to 9 degrees after top dead center, which makes your location of peak pressure about 12 to 15 degrees after top dead center. And it really doesn't matter what the bore or the stroke or any of that nonsense is, because the calculus makes it all kind of come out the same. And so there's this little window in there that if we could peak at that point in the cycle, that's where the pressure across the top of the piston has a maximum mechanical advantage on the crankshaft, right, throughout the cycle, because it's changing, right? The pressure, volume, angle relationship moves in time. So if we could move that such that the maximum amount of pressure was available at a useful point in the cycle, then we win. Right? And that's why, that in whatever spark timing it is that gives you that is by definition MBT.
Mm-hmm. Maximum bang for your buck.
Wide open throttle. Yeah, wide open throttle, a lot of times we can't get there because we're knock limited on pump fuel.
Gotcha.
But if we could have a fuel that was not knock limited, we could go there, right? So that's where C16 and E85 become really cool fuels to play with. Some of the alternative fuels get us there, right? Ethanol, methanol, CNG, propane, those things get you there pretty much because their octanes are way up there.
Mm-hmm.
You basically run MBT all the time.
And I would imagine that, I've never worked with one, but take the direct injection stuff. Are their ignition timings much different because of how they're actually functioning?
Oh, that's a good question. See, DI is kind of funny, right? I started playing with DI a little over a decade ago, and I was working for the Germans at the time, for Siemens VDO. And they had been doing it with Audi and BMW, the Germans who wanted to do it first because, they have the budget to play with it. And we started bringing it to the U.S. on some of our applications. And I went and trained with some of the guys in Germany on how they handle it. And the moral of the story was don't treat DI any different than you treat PFI as far as how you calibrate and how you execute the controls, because there are some engines that are more knock prone than others.
Mm-hmm.
And DI just generally pushes that window further out, but knock is still knock.
Mm-hmm.
So, and air fuel ratio is air fuel ratio. So assuming you actually evaporate and mix the fuel, then combustion is combustion. Now, it's harder to get fuel to mix and evaporate properly on a DI system than it is on PFI. You guys were kind of touching on this with Paul.
Really?
A podcast where, because you hit the hot intake valve, right? And it vaporizes the fuel. And so you have a cloud of vapor, which is very good for combustion.
Sure, but I would have thought that hitting a hot piston had to be pretty damn good too.
But we don't hit the piston. We want to avoid hitting the piston because we run the risk of making a puddle on the top of the piston. So if you actually look at most DI applications and you look at the fully warmed up normal part throttle injection scheme and you look at what angle they're injecting at, it's the intake stroke. So the piston is falling away from the injector, right? So ideally you're not impinging on the surface of the piston, and you're trying to not impinge on the bore walls or on the valve.
Okay, well now I'm completely screwed up because looking at it from the 1,000-foot view here, when I looked, I think one of the first DI things I actually researched was a Mazda, their quote-unquote Sky Active. And I saw these compression levels that were ridiculous for conventional pump fuel.
So the cool part about DI is that the fuel evaporates inside the cylinder, right? So 100% of that latent heat of vaporization comes from that in-cylinder air charge. So we're no longer using the fuel to cool the intake valve, right? So we don't pull heat out of the intake valve. We pull heat out of the air itself. And so just like, let's say we had a turbocharged car, right? Turbo cars make more power when it's cold out, right? Because their coolers work better. So the cooler you make it, the more timing you could run. Agreed?
Mm-hmm.
So you basically have a last chance intercooler in the form of the fuel evaporation in the cylinder.
Oh, wow. So you're using the fuel ends up cooling the charge in the cylinder rather than flashing off because it hits the valve and getting wasted cooling the valve.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Now, that's also the challenge because sometimes that's not enough to get the fuel evaporated, and then we have little tiny droplets that don't evaporate all the way, therefore they can't play completely in the combustion process. And that's where you get like the kind of black soot out the tailpipe on DI engines.
Mm-hmm.
It's particulate matter, and they're starting to measure us on that now. And that's where you're going to start seeing gasoline particulate filters on cars to help clean that up. And it's just going to be a pain in the butt.
Wow.
See, I always thought that it was because you controlled the fuel event and you could kind of handle detonation because of the fuel. But I would have never in a million years, I'm sure people that do calibration, they're like, yeah, Mike, you're stupid. But I mean, I've never looked at one, but it's amazing that it fires down in a stroke. So you're telling me that the compression tolerance that seems to come with a DI motor is because of all effective charge cooling?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just, if you cooled off the air coming in, if you knew it was always going to be 10, 20 degrees cooler, well, if you knew it was always going to be there, you could probably get away with another half a point of compression, right? Or maybe a couple more PSI of boost, or maybe a little of both, right? So, I mean, it just opens the envelope into areas that were previously no-fly zones, right? I mean, and the funny thing is, like in the industry, we start looking at, back in the 90s, oh, you want to run boost, you better have 9-to-1 or lower compression, right? Or the Buick guys, oh my God, the low compression ratios they used to run on those things, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden LS1 came around. They're like, oh man, that's 10-to-1. You can't boost that. No, it turns out it boosts just fine. Okay. LS7, oh, that's 11-to-1. You can never boost that. Oh wait, that works just fine too. Look at Coyote. Oh, that's 11-to-1, and it's a Ford modular. You can't boost. Oh, no, that works really good too. Right. So even on PFI, compression and boost weren't necessarily enemies, but then we turn on a DI, and how much boost can we screw into an LT one now? And the answer, a bunch.
Yeah.
Well, do you get to see, and this was kind of the argument that I've had with Tom and talking to people about this, that I look at like some of the OEMs, and I don't mean any offense to this, but like some of the exotic OEMs, they'll have compression ratios for like higher boost applications, not 10, they're really trying to make some power. They'll be like at the 9-to-1 level with an aluminum head. And I honestly could not tell you if any of those things were direct injected. But this actually kind of gets into, because of your level of understanding of all this gets into a compression versus boost relationship, or does it really all come down to temperature?
Yeah, there's a trade-off. So multiple things, what are the things that would cause it to knock, right? I mean, you guys already know this as hot rodders. Like hot air and hot engines are more likely to knock. I mean, why else do we put ice water intercoolers in our drag cars, right? We wouldn't use ice water if it didn't work.
Yep.
Right. It's not just air density. It's actually, knock mitigation in some cases. But I mean, generally we're running super stupid high octane fuel at that point. So, but even pump gas cars use, ice water reservoirs or put ice in their aftercooler to get a slightly better run. And if you do that, then, what do you know? If the final air charge temp, if you measure it after the intercooler, was lower, we could get away with running, 2 or 3 degrees more spark advance. And holy smokes, does that make a lot more power and torque? Right. So the same thing kind of goes for DI. It's just that we don't get a chance to measure that temperature, but we know there's this cooling event that happens after we measure it. So it doesn't get as heated as it would in a port fuel injection situation. All things else being equal, right? So if we knew it wasn't going to get as hot then we could get away with a couple more pounds of boost or maybe a slightly higher stack compression ratio where we would have been knock limited. Now we push that knock limit a little bit further away. And that's in like the kind of the conventional envelope of, mid-range RPM up to peak power kind of stuff. Where people get into trouble now on boosted DI engines, the manufacturers have been playing this game called downsizing. So they're trying to make a 2-liter engine make all the torque down low that you used to get out of a 3.5-liter V6, right? And so they want this immediate, like 1,500 RPM or less, immediate torque response for the driver, so we don't have to downshift the transmission. So they put these small turbos on that can make really high boost really early. And so you've got this low speed, high load condition. And because of DI, we've opened the envelope way bigger in that area. So we've got this cooling event that we're kind of depending upon. But the problem is that the cliff is really steep on the other side. And that's where guys get into LSPI, or low speed pre-ignition. And it's very similar to knock, as far as broken parts are concerned. Right? You make a lot of conversation pieces out of what used to be an engine really quick with this stuff, except it comes on lightning fast with almost no warning. And it's pre-ignition. What happens is we end up with some sort of hot spot. And because we're low speed, you get a little bit more dwell time in the danger zone. And so, if it starts to get a little unhappy and a little hot, those hot spots light it off before the spark plug. And the net effect to combustion is, we started now, I guess we're going now, right? And the flame goes. And you reach peak pressure before the piston gets up to TDC, and now you've got the irresistible force against the immovable object. And you're going to find out who wins, right? Because the crankshaft's being turned by a 3,000-4,000 pound vehicle pushing it down the road.
Yeah.
Right? The crankshaft is not going to go backwards. Right? And then you got all the cylinder pressure pushing on the piston. So what's in between the two? Something somewhere's got to give. And we break stuff.
That really gave me a whole new way to look at some of the things. Like a train of logic.
It's almost humorous for us on the OEM side when we watch the forums and these guys, tuning the EcoBoost 4-cylinder in the Focus and the Mustang and whatnot, and they get in there and all they do is turn off all the Ford safety guards, and they're like, we're going to make more boost earlier and we're going to let it eat, right? And then these guys are complaining that they break their engines in 6th gear on the freeway. It's like, well, yeah, we put in a safeguard to not let you get to such high load at low RPM because we know this is what happens to the engine if you get there. And so we would limit you to about 10 PSI until you get RPM up out of the danger zone and, reduce your dwell time in the danger zone. Well, these guys go, no, I want to make all of it now. And so they let it make 19 PSI there. And sure as not, they rip these things apart, and they're like, "Oh, this is junk, and it must be, must be this and must be that." Like, or it should just be that you thought you were smarter than everybody in Dearborn.
I got to tell you, just sitting here listening to this conversation and making me think, one of the things I'm definitely going to do, and I will do this, I am going to have to read and watch everything that I can find here, because this is. And I would hope that a lot of tuners or, tuners that want to be calibrators are listening to this, because there's really some new ways of thinking here that probably most conventional engine guys and tuners don't think. They don't think this way. And this is...
that's probably why my training is kind of set up this way, guys. I try and answer the question of why, not just what. Right? If I just told you, hey, put your LS1 at 27 degrees of spark at peak power, you don't learn anything. You just learn, put 27 in the box. Right, make sure it always says 27. Well, what happens when you get a new engine? 27 is not going to be the answer. Right, so here are the forces at work. I want to let you figure out how to fix it for yourself, right? Rather than calling me to tune it for you every single time. Right? I've tuned thousands of cars. I don't need to tune your car. I don't have to be the guy tuning anyone's individual car to make myself feel good. I'd rather see my students be successful on their own without my direct input every time. That would make me happier. Right? Some of my best students are the guys who go out there and then they take what they learn and they actually apply it, and they go run the test, and they go, oh man, I got back to the shop and I tried this, and man, it really does work. Okay, well, good. Do it again.
Yeah.
So it's a small world. A lot of these guys, get talking to each other, and the guys who are best at tuning are the ones who aren't necessarily hoarding the secrets. They're just openly following the science.
Knew I should have went to college.
That makes sense.
You don't have to go to college to do this stuff. That's the funny thing. Like, when I teach my classes, I tell people, like, if you pass high school math, I can teach you the goings on behind the scenes of most ECUs, and I really don't care if you're tuning a Subaru or if you're tuning an LS1 or a Mustang or whatever. We all buy gas at the same pump. We got pistons. We got spark plugs. There are certain rules that will always apply. And in fact, the more crazy the combination is, the further out there we get, the more I sweat the fundamentals. Right?
But
there is no excuse for skipping some of the fundamentals.
But you got to admit, Subarus are stupid.
Well, I mean, why on earth would you run a 180-degree V angle? I mean, unless you're Porsche.
Exactly.
Even then, it's moderately stupid.
Yeah. Okay. My point.
Not picking on the Subaru builders or anything, of course.
No,
but
not at all.
Yeah.
Bring it.
It is kind of stupid.
One Lamar.
It's what you chose. So if that's what you want to mess with, that's your deal.
It's like getting a gold medal in the Special Olympics.
Oh, so harsh. We can't talk about that. We're all good liberal people here. We can't.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So
you laughed at that. You're going to hell with me.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we laughed.
Now, what I meant about the college thing is that, like, the level of understanding, like some of this stuff, and I've talked about this before, that to me, I have gaps in knowledge because I learned something through what I would consider practical experience, and I don't have enough fundamentals to put the pieces together to answer, look, you did this and this happened. Well, why? And then it's kind of the same thing I talked about with, the big yellow thing in the sky is the sun god, because people in the beginning, they knew that the sun came up, the sun went down, it made a more, it must be a god. When you don't know, you try to rationalize with what your level of understanding is to give you the answer. And I really hate gaps in knowledge.
You got to give them an analog.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just got to give them, how to relate it to something they do understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, here are the absolute, procedure that I use to keep myself out of trouble in general. And I do it because of this, right? So whether I'm teaching you how to get air fuel ratio correct, or how, if I'm learning how to shoot a pistol accurately, right? I can talk to a military guy and say, okay, well, look, sight alignment, stance, grip, these are the things that, need to happen. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, here you go. Fuel modeling, air charge modeling, ratio control. Oh, okay. And just give them an analog and go, oh, well, you got to do this, and then this. Oh, yeah, now I got it. Right. And you just got to find a way to connect with the student. And that's usually the challenge in any kind of classroom environment. And I always tell people, like, don't do it because Greg said so. That's absolutely not an excuse for, why it's got to be. Do it because you thought about it and you go, hey, you know what? That makes sense. And, I agree. And I tried it myself and it follows what he said it would probably do, and I see why it does that, and I moved it, and it went in the direction I thought it was going to go. Therefore, I'm going to continue doing it this way.
Hey, why do some OEs put in a bank of direct injectors and a bank of electronic controlled injectors?
Well, everything's electronically controlled.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, the
port injectors.
Port injectors. Yeah.
Port plus, okay, so
PFI.
port plus DI.
PFI, yeah.
So like the Toyota engine, right? So both of them have their advantages, right? DI is nice because it gets you that knock control. It's the in-cylinder cooling and quenching that lets you open up the performance envelope a little bit, right? So you can get away with higher compression, or you can get away with some boost. So that's where DI is really good. DI is really tough on cold start because you're not spraying against this hot intake valve that's helping you evaporate the fuel. So port injection is actually easier for us as calibrators for cold start. And when I say cold start, it starts at kind of like the emissions temp of 72 and going down from there. But I mean, it goes all the way down to, by the way, will the thing start at all at minus 40? Because we test that. Right? We actually have an emissions test at minus 10 C, so about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. We have to be clean enough to pass emissions there for the cold CO test. And then below that, then we got to get down to, minus 40 and just say, under any circumstances whatsoever, will this thing start? Gasoline doesn't want to evaporate at minus 40. That's the point at which things get really crunchy. Minus 20, you get a little bit of evaporation. It's kind of sort of okay. But PFI is going to be an advantage in that kind of situation. Whereas DI, you got these droplets, they're just kind of floating around in the cylinder, and droplets don't really burn all that well, as it turns out.
So I guess backside of intake gets hotter much before the chamber.
Mm-hmm. Well, keep in mind, if you have any fire in the chamber, you're heating the intake valve, right? And the valve is not water-cooled the way the liner is. So that valve will retain the heat and be able to, the only thing cooling the valve is the fuel spraying on it on the top side, right? So 100% of that energy, after it goes into the mass of the valve, has to come out either through contact on the valve seat or the fluid hitting it. So generally, and then, by the way, if you do port injection, you can inject earlier while the valve is still closed and have some resonance time and wait for it to evaporate over time before the valve opens and sucks that stuff into the cylinder.
Yeah, I guess that's the other side of it too. You have the time advantage in a port injection to allow more of this effect to happen.
Precisely, yeah. Heat transfer and evaporation take time. Right? It's small numbers, but it is time.
There's so many new ways I have to look at some things here. This has been, for me, this has been a great conversation.
Sure. There's a ton of other stuff we got to get to.
Sorry, but I can't ask questions?
No,
dickhead?
Of course you can.
No, go ahead. You guys are on the clock. I think you called like my 900 number.
That's fine. I'm done. Go ahead, Tom.
No.
Go ahead. No. By all means, go ahead.
That's not what I meant. I meant there's a whole nother show left.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff that we kind of had actually planned on, because this is what happens when you get a guest that has good information.
Yeah,
you write down a whole outline of where you want to go. Yeah, out the window. That happens every time to me.
It's tangency. Welcome to my life, guys.
Yeah. Well, we got to get to at least to the EPA stuff.
Yeah, we had a whole big lead in about the EPA thing, because that to me is one of the most important things. And then we got on catalytic converters. That's how we got on Tuning Town, on Tuning Highway.
So tell us, I know you're active because you told me. Give us the cliff notes of what the EPA is trying to do to us, and what our people need to do to kind of prevent it and help the cause.
Yeah, well, due to us, keep in mind that all they're doing is electing to enforce rules that are already currently on the books, right? So the Clean Air Act from the 1970s says thou shalt not modify things that affect emissions on the car.
Yeah.
Right? So any emissions control device, so anything that affects air, fuel, or spark, is, that's an emissions control device. And if you monkey with it, you have tampered in the eyes of the EPA and the Clean Air Act, right? And it's one of those guilty until proven innocent deals. They assume that the moment you touched it, you've tampered it, and therefore you must have made the emissions worse. They don't really have any data to prove that you made it worse, but they know that you tampered with it, and that you touched it, right? And the only way to kind of prove that you haven't right now is to go get an EO, right? Or be a manufacturer of record and do a complete submission to the EPA, which the EO is super, super, super simple compared to what a Ford, GM, or Chrysler has to do to certify a car, right? Not only do they have to deliver a car to a lab and say, check my tailpipe numbers across these tests and make sure that I don't have over X grams per mile, but they also have to go back in and induce failures on the diagnostics and prove that the right diagnostic catches the right failure for the right reason at the right time on cycle. It's a huge amount of additional work.
So what exactly does EO mean?
Executive order, which says that we've tested your vehicle and we've determined that your emissions are basically to the same standard as what that car was certified as new. So a lot of this for cold air kits and superchargers is probably the biggest application.
Okay, right? So if Mike and I developed a handheld for a Hyundai Sonata, because those are high-end, high-performance cars,
there you go.
We would need an EO for it to be legal to sell.
And so you would most likely get yourself a Hyundai Sonata. You'd do your own development work. And when you're all done, you say, okay, this is the magic combination. We're going to put this file into the car. You need to run a car with that file in it on the emissions traces. And so they bag it. They take 100% of what comes out the tailpipe. They run it through an analyzer. And that analyzer tells them exactly how much stuff came out the tailpipe. They measure that stuff, and they check it against the standard. And it says, well, you can only have so many grams per mile. And the test was 7.2 miles, and you had this many grams. And, okay, well, you're 0.04. Okay, it looks like you're good, right? And if it passes, and they'll also plug in and make sure that your diagnostics are active and the monitors ran. So, it has to say, all the O2 sensor monitor and catalyst monitor have to have run somewhere along the way. So they have, they're checking to see is it turned on and that it ran and completed and passed without setting a mill. Then we say, oh, well, looks like all the diagnostics are working and your tailpipe numbers were clean. Therefore, you must not be a bad person for selling this. You're not destroying the environment. You are now granted EO number, blah, blah, blah. You can put the sticker in with your package, and it is legal for sale as long as people use exactly this kit that you guys have made and delivered.
Exactly this kit as prescribed. Don't do anything different. Don't modify it. Well, now, see, here's where... This is where some of the stuff...
Can't change the spark, nothing.
Right. See, and that kind of brought up something that I always had as a question. When the engines make more and more power, I mean, look, it's a fact of life. You're burning more fuel. There has to be a higher quantity of something coming out the tailpipe that they don't like. When do the OEMs and does the EPA worry about what your wide open throttle generation is as well, or no?
Ooh, good question. So if we do it right, generally speaking,
I'm his favorite.
More fuel completely converted just means more CO2.
Okay.
And currently in the U.S., we don't have a CO2 requirement. Right? In Europe and China, they start to play this game. But here in the U.S., they're not limiting us on CO2. And they're not taxing on it. So now we have a demon that makes 840. So we can make tons and tons of power. We just have to generally do it burning clean. And keep in mind the emissions test, none of those emissions tests require 600, 700, 800 horsepower to drive the cycle. Right?
Mm-hmm.
US06 is the most aggressive test, and the better your power to weight ratio gets, the easier it is to drive that test. So all our performance stuff, generally speaking, shouldn't have too hard of a time passing emissions as long as we have a functional catalyst. And I forget where I was going with this.
Well, I asked about the wide open throttle. I mean, that's kind of interesting. The component that would be the deciding factor, they don't currently check, or they don't check in that fashion.
So there's one other requirement that they throw at us, and that is you can't just dump fuel on it at wide open throttle. So even though it's not tested on the actual emissions cycle, there is a requirement that we must run no richer than LBT, or lean best torque. So again, if you look at what I did in the Calibrated Success Advanced Tuning Series, episode 2 was the fueling, and we looked at torque versus air fuel ratio. And you can see as you go rich of stoic, you start picking up torque. And the test kind of peaks and plateaus in some area and then tapers off again. So the point at which you've added enough fuel to get up on the plateau, and adding any more fuel doesn't significantly increase the torque, that's LBT, lean best torque. And so you can go to that if that's the fueling you need to hit your advertised horsepower number, but you're not allowed to go any richer unless it is for immediate component protection against immediate damage and failure. So basically catalysts, O2 sensors, and turbines.
Yeah, so
get hot in the exhaust.
Okay.
And we're allowed to dump fuel to cool them as much as necessary to keep them under the threshold.
So this
Most
is
of the time that's like
this is kind of like tuning for maximum power, and we've talked about it with a bunch of people that there's kind of a window where you'll make your best power, where there's no big pickup and there's no big loss if you're in kind of this range. So what?
Yeah, especially on naturally aspirated engines, that window is pretty flat.
Sure. So if you were on the rich side of that, you're actually not doing anybody any favors, including Mr. Environment.
Yeah.
You really are just wasting fuel for no return.
Yeah, the only good thing for us in the horsepower world is going slightly on the rich side gives you, on pump gas, on octane-limited fuels, you're less likely to knock, right? You get a little bit more cooling effect from the fuel, a little bit more quench from the fuel. So it opens up the window a little bit more in that one. So, that's where we kind of cheated a little bit. It's like one of those small areas we can benefit, but generally on an OEM, there's not enough to worry about there. It's like 3 horsepower. And by the way, when they rate horsepower at the OEM, they don't do it, running a dyno jet on a transient test, right? They don't do even a load bearing dyno on chassis. None of those power measurements are done in car. They're done on the engine dyno, steady state. So when they say it makes 500 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, it means they dialed up 6,000 RPM
and left it there
at 6,000, and they have to make 500 for 60 seconds continuously.
Oof. It shrivels the asshole up again.
Standard. Yeah, just sit there and hold it until they get tired of looking at it. And it has to average 500 for that whole time to advertise it as 500 SAE horsepower.
You know what's funny? To look at engine stability dynoing, we always did a steady state test in 3 or 4 places to see how the motor behaved. Always.
Yeah.
Nobody ever does that anymore.
Well, the OEMs do it.
Yeah.
If you talk to power development guys at the OEMs, that's the only way they know how. They're flabbergasted that somebody would be testing their engine transiently on a chassis rolls. How do you even do that? Like every chassis rolls that they've seen in GM, Ford, Chrysler, wherever, typically those are emissions dynos, so they're not even knurled very well. Like there's not enough tire traction grip between the car and the rolls to transmit 500 horsepower or more, right? So the only way they can test it is put it on the engine dyno.
Well, you gonna let me talk again, Tom? You're looking at me like you were going to say something, then you didn't say anything.
No.
Did I hurt your feelings?
No, not at all.
All right.
It's not possible.
I have one more question, and I'll let Tom handle it. So, realistically, with the EPA, we'll say positions that they either used to have or currently have, how problematic could this potentially be for industry as a whole, whether it be racing, performance aftermarket? I mean, how far-reaching could this be?
Oh, I mean, it has the potential to ruin it for everybody, right? Do you guys ever go to the at SEMA show? They would have the EPA meeting kind of Thursday afternoon at the SEMA show every year, and they used to invite a guy named Evan Belser, who was the head of enforcement for the EPA. And he's a professional jerk, but he's just doing his job, right? His job is enforcement. Right? And he basically says, you guys are all evil people and you're all breaking the law, right? And unless you've got an EO, you're breaking the law, and we're going to come down on you. And what we're going to do is we're going to find out, if you are selling a defeat device, because they always like to use that word, and you're tampering with the precious emissions controls of these vehicles, and you're creating excess constituents out the tailpipe to give little Timmy asthma. And we're here to defend little Timmy and his asthma, and we're going to make sure you don't do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to find out how many of these things you sold for how much, and we're going to take away all the profit you never should have made. And then we're going to go back and figure out how much it's going to cost to offset what you've done to the environment.
Holy shit.
And that guy actually walks in and walks out?
Yeah, I mean, nobody beat him up? Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's how enforcement goes, right? And they're legally allowed to do this, right?
I bet he's a smug motherfucker, too.
Shops recently, in the last couple of years, the EPA came, knocked on their door and said, hey, we see you're selling these devices that modify vehicles, and they're not approved with an EO. And so I'd like to know how many of these devices you sold, and give us your customer list and your sales records, and we want to know. And, Casper's was a shining example. They were selling, devices that basically tricked the computer into thinking the downstream O2s worked fine when they were catalyst.
Is that the O2? They called them simulators, stimulators. They had all kinds of different names for them that people would buy and put on their Corvettes.
Yeah, well, not just Corvettes. I mean, they're selling to everybody, right? Mustang, Camaro, anything you could plug it into. And what it did is it created the slow oscillating signal that a healthy downstream O2 would have after a functioning catalyst. And so the computer would read that and go, oh, yeah, it must be working fine, right? And that's how it diagnoses both the sensor and the catalyst. And so these guys would put those O2 sims in and then saw the catalyst off the car, right? Put long tubes on or, just off-road pipes or whatever.
Yeah, test pipes.
The computer thinks it's working fine. Well, that's the definition of a defeat device. Right?
Yeah, I mean that
intended to trick the system.
Yeah, they were guys that shoplifted while looking at the video camera in the store. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it.
Gave the camera the finger.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well,
and scared the guy on the way out to stop him.
Yeah. On the side of things, like, does it not work? Racing parts only, whatever you do. If you're a knucklehead, it's your problem.
EPA doesn't care. That you can't hide behind that. Unless you can prove that it was on a race. So this is where the SEMA thing. The last couple of years, I went to D.C. in May for what they call the Washington Rally. We literally meet with lawmakers, and we're working on the RPM Act the last couple of years, making sure that gets passed so they don't outlaw race cars.
Mm-hmm.
The EPA also came out a little while ago and said, hey, anything that was ever built as a street car with a VIN had emissions equipment on, and you're never allowed to disable emissions equipment.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Even if you had a Spec Neon or Spec Miata or Spec E30, right? Or you walk through the pits at National Mustang Racers Association weekend, right? You go to Milan Dragway on a Friday night. Anything that ever had a VIN, according to the EPA, had to retain all its emissions equipment always, all the time.
Now, I just want to interrupt you. I just want to interrupt you because when I read about that, that's kind of how I took it. And what they said was, well, that's not really what we meant, but I understand what you're saying and what I said in the beginning of the show. If it was kind of worded that way, it's just a matter of if and when they decide to enforce it that way. So you've lost before you started if that went that way.
And they said, oh, no, we, that's not our intent, but that was what was written in there. And so SEMA came back and said, no, that's what you wrote. And so SEMA made a petition at whitehouse.gov. And, the standard is you have to get 100,000 signatures to get anybody to take another look at your complaint here, right? And so they put that up there and through the SEMA network, and a lot of us shared it with everybody we know. And I think it was, in 24 hours, they had about 1 million. Right? That's how big our industry is.
Well, that's good.
Because it basically said, unless you were a tube-frame car, right? So unless you were, Top Fuel or NASCAR,
purpose-built
car Formula One, right? You're illegal. Period. So no more sportsman racers, right? Ever.
Wow.
And that's what it said. And they're like, oh, that's not what we meant. Well, that's what you said in the document.
Yeah, but if you process that document, if you read that document the way it was written, because I read it, and I remember people bashing me on Facebook, no, that's not what they meant. It's always said something kind of like that. I was like, yeah, but, do I have to remind you, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it? I mean, it's just...
Exactly. We're from the government. We're here to help you.
Yes, it's exactly, you can enforce something as you see fit once it's there. And this is a problem.
Yeah, precisely. And the real problem I have with it is, okay, as much as I like racing, I love street cars. I have modified cars in my garage. And that industry only exists because racing can exist. If you outlawed all the sportsman racers and their parts in the modification of their cars, there is zero middle ground left for the enthusiast who has a daily driver. Right? That whole end of the industry evaporates overnight.
And that's got to be a huge portion.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's why we got to be vigilant and stay on this stuff. And the people that do go to Washington, I think we should go to Washington.
Can we get paid?
See, that's what I mean.
Obviously, I'm completely money motivated because we've been doing this for, how many episodes here?
110.
Yeah. I haven't made a dime going to Washington yet. So, I mean, I do it because I love this industry, and I want to see it continue, and I want to see people grow and learn more about it and do it responsibly. Right? Because there's a way to do it. I mean, going back to that original point, one of the things I was working with one of my clients on, hey, what if we made a car that made 1,000 and passed emissions? Right? And it's not that far out, all things considered. I mean, Demon's already at 840, and that's with a warranty. If we wanted to do a one-off, it could totally be done. we'd spec a fairly expensive catalyst, but we could build an engine. We build engines all the time, make 1,000 horsepower. Right? That's a chip shot for us in the industry now.
Yeah, I had said that, and we talked about, of all things not exactly related, but the diesel truck side. Look at what the hell happened to them. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, so you want to know what really got the EPA all cooking on this was EPA was in Colorado on I-70 on the side of the road testing something on like medium-duty diesel trucks. And they had stopped for a minute on the side of the road, and some dude rolled past them in like, a 3/4 ton or 1 ton truck and rolled coal on the dudes that were the EPA on the side of the road.
Good move.
It's a guy giving the camera the finger again.
Yeah.
And all of us.
EPA looked at each other and looked back at the truck and said, "How's he able to do that?" And so they start Googling.
Yeah.
They go, "Oh, wow, there's lots of guys doing this." And they say, "Oh, well, we should stop that."
God.
And so they decide to crank down on them. And oh, by the way, not only are they modifying diesels, they're modifying gas cars. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the diesel, the EPA just kind of lumped everybody into that same evildoer bracket. So that's kind of how they look at us. We're all evildoers, and we're all thwarting emissions equipment, giving little Timmy asthma. And we're guilty until proven innocent.
See, the really bad thing here is that it's probably efficiency of tune, but like my diesel in my truck, I would never look for a tune that does that. But if you're at low speed, off boost, and you jump on it, you get a chunk of smoke for a split second, I guess, while everything is coming to be.
Yeah, and there's ways, I won't claim to be the diesel expert. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm going to stick with my spark plugs.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Banks Gale is like, he used to teach at my school. He is proven that it is entirely possible to make all kinds of ludicrous amounts of horsepower with a diesel without making black smoke.
I got a Banks
business
system in there. That's what it is.
Yep.
Does it actually smoke with Gale's stuff on it?
Yeah, but I mean, who knows? I mean, it's got one of their a couple position deals or whatever. And I mean, look, in fairness, the one says race only, and that's usually where I leave it. I mean,
okay.
By usual, he means always.
Yeah.
Normally, if you use only his stuff, he's pretty good about trying to make sure that it's pretty cleanly burned. And he's got the same kind of approach of let's not waste fuel and waste energy. Let's put it all into the crankshaft, dumping out the exhaust.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense.
Yep. It's the way it should be.
So really, a coal roller kind of started some of this shit. Boy, that's something.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I mean, I have to admit, I do giggle when somebody asks for it and they get blasted.
Oh, you mean a Prius?
Yeah, like a Prius, like guys getting stupid and yelling at you. I mean, I've had people yell at me in my excursion. You're killing the environment.
Why can't we just use train horns like civilized individuals?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really something.
Yeah.
So the EPA thing was quite serious. And I mean, I guess at this point it has been corrected. They rewrote it.
Yeah, but now you still get the shops that got, the knock-knock visits, and they, EPA aims to fine every one of those people that they stopped and visited, right? Because they're selling defeat devices currently. And one of my clients was on that list, and I spent a lot of time on the phone with him. And fortunately, he's got an EO for at least one of his product combinations, and he had been doing active development work on the other stuff. And so he's actually got a leg to stand on versus some of these guys that got to visit. And so he can say, hey, look, Memorandum 1A says, unless you have data that can prove otherwise, if you have data that proves that your emissions are no worse than the baseline, then you're allowed to sell the device. But the only thing that Memorandum 1A really allowed was, hey, it doesn't say it, but basically the only thing the EPA recognizes is a CARB EO number. Well, he had one EO, and he's working towards more of them. So he basically says, all those other ones you want to find me for are all pending EOs. And we've got piles of data where I've been testing them. And I've got all kinds of lambda measurements, and we run them on cycle. And, we do cold starts, and we're trying to get air-fuel ratio right so we don't, blow hydrocarbons in the first 20 seconds of the test. And, so I've been trying to calibrate these the right way. And we just, the lab was backed up, and we couldn't get in there quick enough. And now you guys are finding us for this, but I bet if you took one of those vehicles and ran them in your lab at the EPA, you might find that it's actually not polluting. So what I'd love to see for the industry is there a way, short of getting a full EO on every single thing you do, could you, as a tuner shop, have some way to collect data that says, hey, I'm no worse than baseline? Right? So, these tuner shops all invest in dynos. Well, let's get a half a step further and say, use the dyno, drive the cycle, and have some way to measure the tailpipe that proves that emissions aren't way out in left field, that they're still pretty close to what it looked like as it came in.
Yeah, and it would probably need to be something that, you could, quote unquote, maintain custody of evidence.
Yeah, but at least, then you have some plausible deniability, right? Then you're saying, hey, look, this is what it looked like when it came in. Here's what it looked like when I was done modifying it, and you can see that, hydrocarbons are here and oxides of nitrogen are here, and, hey, it doesn't look too bad. Then you could at least have an intelligent discussion of, I'm not really the guy giving little Timmy asthma.
Well, sadly,
I would love to get that audience with the EPA and be able to come to some sort of, science-based explanation of, how the industry could live in harmony with them.
Well, there's a dude.
Totally doable.
There's a dude that comes right by my house, and he goes to a golf course in Bedminster. If I ever see him, I'll pull him aside and be like, "Hey, we got to have a discussion with the right people."
Yeah.
And after they get done tasing me,
after the cuff marks wear off.
So a company like Manley, Tom, that makes pistons.
Yep.
You make pistons for an engine. I mean, could they technically say that all of those pistons have to have an exempt number because a guy could, quote unquote, potentially use them on the street?
We're not affecting emissions.
Well, what do they consider an emissions affecting? Is it, and I mean, it's probably a better question for Greg.
Well, it's fuel air spark, right?
Anything that could change the tailpipe numbers, right? So if the piston changes the compression ratio, they can start arguing that you've changed the combustion process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. But if it doesn't change the compression ratio, there's really, I don't
change material spec. Let's say we go from a hyper-eutectic to a forged.
Right.
And it's the same exact geometry as far as the combustion chamber is concerned.
Right.
I don't really see, other than arguing wall clearance and blow by, it's kind of small numbers at this point.
Yeah, it'd be tough. But then they can go back to the original law from the 70s that says if you do anything, if you boil it down to the simplest form, they can jam you up without proving anything, just
not
legally.
Piston, it's what else did you do to the engine that required more piston?
Yeah. We just have to.
Because the guy putting pistons in his engine is seldom doing only pistons to a completely stock engine.
So kind of what this is, it depends how hard somebody wants to lean on you. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of comical because you get cold air kits get their own EOs, superchargers get their own EOs. You get all these widgets that each get their own EO, but yet if you put them all together simultaneously, is it really going to work right? I mean, isn't that why we pay for custom tuning? But yet, as soon as you do custom tuning, it's no longer meeting the standard of what was tested, so therefore it's no longer legal.
That's a fantastic hole in this whole executive order argument, because if it would not only have to be that you bought this, well, now it's like illegal for you to buy anything else. And it would be like, it would be the same as the government saying, well, look, if you're going to sell this exempt part, you have to know if the customer has another exempt part, because then you're actually still doing something wrong.
That's Pandora's box.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
Which is why I'd love to have some way for the end, installation facility to get at least a believable number that says, look, it's not a gross polluter. Right. We tested it and it's no worse than baseline where it came in at. That'd be kind of cool if we could get them, our emissions dyno cells that we use to get the real numbers, dude, they're $1 million for a cell. Nobody in a speed shop is putting $1 million CVS column in their speed shop. I get it. Right. But, if it were in the thousands of dollars range and they could get a useful number for it, and it would provide the data that you would be able to hand to the EPA should they ever come knocking and say, hey, based on this data, we're not polluting, and they could look at it and go, okay. And then it would be a very wise investment, in my opinion.
Yeah, it would, no doubt. But I just had a question in my head, and I lost it because I'm old. Damn it.
Not that old.
Yeah, I guess I'm not. It was the excuse I was going for. Well, Greg, listen, I think we're going to wrap it. It's been great. I need you to plug your stuff. I know you've written books, you've got DVDs. We might as well start now because you're probably going to have the longest plug we've ever had.
I don't know. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. The books are on Amazon. Just search Greg Banish. That's the easiest way to get them. The videos, I've got a number of different videos. So I've got like GM Basic, GM Advanced, I've got Ford Advanced, and then I've got what I call the Advanced Tuning Series. Those are actually Blu-rays. We film those all in high def. All that stuff you can actually get through my partner company, which is Detroit Technical Media. You just search DetroitTechnicalMedia.com, or you can get them from Summit Racing. They sell them there too. Just search for Calibrated Success. You'll find that stuff there. So I've got, I don't know, probably a good 12 hours of video content across all those different discs right now. And we're making more. My buddy Dave is my partner on that stuff. I'm working. Everyone keeps asking me, hey, when you can go live for digital delivery? We're actively working. I've actually got one really cool venue that we're going to have for some of that stuff coming up in the future, but it's not ready for prime time yet. So in the meantime, buy the disc. We're making more in the future. There will always be more. I got a class coming up at Allison's place down in Texas in October. I don't do the classes as often as I used to. So we're doing the Secrets of VFI calibration class down in Fort Worth at Dynacom's headquarters. That's October, I think, 14th. It's on the Facebook page for Calibrated Success and Dynacom. I don't know, that's about it right now. I mean, we'll have more video stuff, and I'll have more ways to find it. But
okay,
you guys tell us what you want to see, and we kind of put it on the list of what we want to produce. I try not to be a Me Too training company. I try and put a little bit more thought into it and a little more science behind it, and sometimes it takes a while to put this stuff together.
Do you get out to see them every year?
I'm kind of an every other year. So I went the last 2 years in a row for that EPA meeting. So I don't know if I'll be there this year, but I never miss PRI. I always go to PRI.
Well, we're going to be at PRI, so we'll look you up there. But
absolutely.
All right. What are the chances of having you on again at some point? A couple months.
Good time, man. Just let me know when you guys want to do it.
Okay.
Think up schedules.
Do we ever get an answer on a cathedral port head for a motor?
No,
like 1,200. All right. Well,
he ducked it a little.
We'll
bit.
give those guys a pass.
I don't know. I'll let the cylinder head guys argue over which is better. Lambda 1 is Lambda 1 to me, man. I think the next round of T-shirts are going to look like Revenge of the Nerds. They're going to be Lambda, Lambda, Lambda.
All right, man. We appreciate it. We'll get you back, and thanks again for everything.
Yeah, Greg, thank you. It was great to think about things from a different perspective. I truly enjoyed
no problem,
this.
Gents. Glad to be here.
Great.
Oh yeah.
Thanks,
All right, man. Be good.
All right. Thanks.
There was I don't know if people understood some of that how good some of that stuff is, the compression and charge temperature. I mean, we know that happens, but this is because when I tell people there's shit that I just can't talk about because I don't know. When you're talking about,
and he knows,
he knows, and it's not, and this is what makes me fucking crazy because I want to know everything. I don't want to know how to do something. I want to know why
it does. Yeah.
Because if you don't know the why, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, that was really, I thought DI had such good control of the fuel that it was injected around combustion event so that you could now, almost exactly what Tad said. Although, Tad, they do ping.
Yeah.
They rattle. So I thought, again, trying to explain a big yellow thing in the sky, I thought the injection point was such that it allowed you to tolerate more compression. Turns out it's not even remotely the case.
Yep.
So even everybody like me can learn something. A smart guy that knows it all. That's
wonder if Mogul learned anything.
I don't know, but that was pretty damn amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, this might be stuff that other people that are, even tuners might know. Well, that's a function of this.
Right.
But I didn't know it, and I'd be willing to bet that the bulk of the people that tune didn't understand some of those principles.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and listen again.
Yeah, I like the way where it's taking the heat and using the valve. If you got the port injection along with the direct injection, it's like, well, wait, why?
But you see, if you stitch this all together, you listen to what he said, you listen to what Paul said about the placement. And I mean, there's really a lot of info here if you listen.
There's a ton of info. I'm going to listen again.
Well,
I might even subscribe.
We're going to start charging you $100 a month.
We should charge one of us.
It was really good to have him.
Yeah.
You know what else I enjoyed too? Hearing about the steady state dyno side of things.
Yeah.
Because that is how you get stable data.
Yep.
It really is. And
a minute.
A minute, no. Like I mentioned, I said it when he said it. I said, that's asshole pucker.
Yeah,
right there.
I remember you saying
I can't do that. I mean, that's insane. But I guess, this goes back to what everybody else used to say. If it does it on the dyno, it should do it on the dyno because it'll do it in a car.
Sure.
But wow. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I learned. I'm gonna make sure I send this to a couple of people that operated dyno and say, why would you steady state test?
Yeah.
All right.
The arguers.
So what else we got? Anything?
No.
That's about it.
Play the outro music.
I'm gonna go drive a Corvette for a while.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're gonna be bringing that thing home.
Oh yeah.
Poor Brian. Well, look at it this way. He's getting something new. I don't know if he's gonna get. I don't know if he's gonna get a 2016 or 17 or.
Getting a lot of $100 bills. I know that.
I told him to wait for the fabled mid-engine. Nah, fuck. I should have asked him about that.
All right.
All right.
Actually,
well, we'll be back on Monday.
Yep.
Funny to think about it. Tom came in an Uber and he's leaving in a vet, man. Who got the deal tonight? Right.
Nice. Way to hit the post, Todd. See you, everybody.